I'm the Managing Director of the Resource Management Institute, and let me welcome everyone to our fourth and final Power Up broadcast for 2021. We've had some great topics this year. We really appreciate your attending and your participation. I want to say a real big thanks to three companies, MavenLink, Heat-In, and Tempest Resource, for their support of this broadcast. These firms have been very supportive of our past power-ups and other events, and it really shows their commitment to the discipline of resource management. We appreciate their support, and without it, some of these broadcasts wouldn't be possible. So we thank them very, very much. I'm really excited to lead the conversation today, along with our guest speaker, Chris Nakovics from ServiceNow, and I'll give a broader introduction to Chris here after I go through a little bit of my thoughts on data management best practices for resource management. So I've been in the tech business for about 43 years, and while I know there's many data-intensive business disciplines, I can't think of any that are more data-intensive than resource management. And if you don't see it that way, I'll just challenge you that you're probably not thinking broadly enough about what's possible with the resource management information. So let me go ahead and get us started here. A brief introduction to the Resource Management Institute. If you're not familiar with them, we are dedicated to the advancement of resource and workforce management, and we do that in a whole lot of different ways. Best practice definition and development, which is embraced in our RMCP certification training. We've done 19 research reports since the inception of the RMI in 2016. And we'll continue. We got 4 more planned for this year. We've got one currently, a survey currently going, and we got a nice extensive white paper library. We've got our training and certification programs for resource management, and there are both certification programs. There's an intro course, there's an advanced course, so you got to go look at those if you haven't, and a variety of events. And I'm going to point out a couple of those coming up here at the end of this broadcast. And we're trying to help companies with better project performance, resource utilization, customer and employee satisfaction. So a lot of different things. So anyway, we're excited to be here. We're all things resource management, and data management, as I mentioned, is high on my list of things that I think are really, really important to effective resource management. And I thought I'd talk to this briefly. It was the abstract that was out there when all of you registered for the event. And data, RM is just data intensive. And when you think about it, if service labor is 3/4 of our service business costs, is why wouldn't we be really focused on data collection, analysis, and reporting of resource management information? So in this broadcast, we're going to focus on things like data collection, data usage, and creating strategic value from the data that you have. Now, on the left-hand side of this page, I wanted to point out this, for those of you who have been through a certification program, you know what this is our just-in-time resourcing, commercial-grade solution for resource management. Is what we teach in the certification program. But the important part I want to communicate here, there are 6 elements that we teach that are essential to you having effective resource management in your project-based service business. And you can just walk around the wheel from skills inventory to staffing, forecasting, sourcing, technology, and governance. But those 6 things you need. And so if you think about those 6 things as the elements of what are going to comprise your resource management process, then you have to think about what's the data that I need in order to be able to do that. And so there are 4 questions that I'd be asking as I walk around and look at each element is, what outputs do I need to run the day-to-day operation, and therefore, what inputs would be required? But presumably all of you are at some place in your resource management maturity spectrum, so you probably have thought about through that. And the second question is, I'm collecting certain types of data, but I'm not getting any outputs from it. What are those? Have I identified those, and so that hopefully I can turn those into what I want to get as outputs. The third, what outputs would I like to get that I'm not collecting data for, and then therefore how do I go about that, and then how am I going to generate those outputs? And then, lastly is not to forget, in any data-intensive environment, how do you ensure the integrity of the data and avoid duplicate entry of data? And I'll speak more to that point when we talk about PSA PPM tools later on, as well as just generally your processes for ensuring data integrity. So all four important things. By the way, all of you will be able to get a copy of this. This video will be posted out on the website shortly after we get done. So, and there will be a PDF copy, I believe, that's available. I think Thomas just put something in the comments box there on your panel. So in the second quarter of this year, we did a broadcast on the digital transformation and what the journey is all about. And we had these three things on there: status quo, automated, and transformed. And interesting, about 30% of companies today still fit in this box of I'm using Excel, I got bespoke solutions, and they haven't moved to a modern PSA PPM tool, which we think is really important in today's environment. And so, but the bulk of you are in this middle column, and that's a good thing. And you're using transactional data to drive better decision making. What we're trying to do at the RMI is move our members even further to the right, to the use of we'll call it transformed business, where you're using artificial intelligence, advanced BI, and analytics to help to lead your decision making in your businesses. So I want to try to tie this then to my following conversation. So transactional data. So think about that column in the middle. In that 2Q power up that we did earlier this year, and you can, by the way, you can go back and reference that one as well, as we talked about 5 things that we know our members, our PSA PPM users tell us that are a bedrock for having effective resource management and the data that you need in order to run that. One is around skills management, the data around, who do you have, what are their skills, where are they located, what are they on a project, when are they coming off, where are their career desires, and those kind of things. Supply and demand matching, think of that as a staffing function. How do I put supply of people with the demand I have for work? Resourcing before the project is sold, giving us more proactive insight into going forward. Capacity management and forecasting. And forecasting, the number one challenge our members have is getting good at forecasting. And just a reminder, hiring people takes time. And if you can't look 3, 4, 5 months out as to what your resource needs are going to be, you're always going to be behind the curve, because it just takes time to find people. And then project team modeling. So when you're thinking about data and reporting capabilities on a transactional level, at a bare minimum, think about these 5 things. What's the data I need to do those things? Am I collecting that data? Am I getting outputs from it from my system? We also use this page in a prior broadcast. We talked about transforming your business, your RM function, to get more strategic value from your resource management data. So thinking that the stuff on the left is kind of bread and butter kind of stuff: project performance, better utilization, more flexibility, being proactive, and happy customers, and yes, happy employees, particularly around employee engagement. Are we assigning people to work that is better aligned with their interests and their career paths? But I really want to speak mostly on this page of the right-hand side, which is the strategic nature of the data that you could potentially get to, and that's things like labor cost data, things that can help me drive better labor force stability, really important in today's environment. Speed and agility, predictability. Can I do this constantly, similarly, produce similar results month after month, or do I look like up and down with peaks and valleys in our resource management performance? And then certainly brand quality recognition. If you're driving great project performance because you've got great resource management capabilities, it can't do anything other than help the quality of your brand and its reputation in the marketplace. So the right-hand side of this is where we think that tomorrow's RMO goes, and think about the labor or the data requirements for those things in that strategic box. By the way, this would be a great reference document for you all. So when I think about strategic data, this is actually a page out of our advanced resource management course that we teach, and we talk about some of the strategic outcomes you might want to get from your business. So think about things like labor cost per hour. How many of you really are sitting around thinking about, how do I lower my labor cost per hour, as opposed to, I'm just trying to staff people to work and just trying to get projects done on time? Getting to the precision to where you can be able to do that, having better forecast accuracy, better retention of the right kind of people. And so when we think about the data that you need to be able to do that, here's some of the things you should be thinking about: skills type, experience level, project proper project capacity. And if I look backwards and say that I over or under resource my projects, because we typically find there's a lot left on the table here. And then, the projects that have struggled typically we'd find are under capacity in how they were assigned. Things like forecast accuracy, employee attrition, customer satisfaction. These are all data elements that we would hope that as you're thinking about trying to get more strategic value, you're collecting and storing this data to optimize your strategic cost drivers. So, and then the last thing that I want to talk about before I introduce Chris Nakovics is going to talk a bit about how they're using, what are they doing for data management, for resource management at ServiceNow. These are 5 best practices I want to leave you with as a summary. Is first of all, again, it's all about data. Ability to capture, correlate, and analyze the data, and have you really thought that through? And then putting the data to work with a modern PSA or PPM tool, and supplementing that with BI or AI capabilities, by the way, that may be a part of those PSA or PPM tools, something to look for when you're looking for a new tool. Analyst capability in RMO, really important. You got all this data, who's looking at it and telling us what it says. Really important part. Systems integration is really important. So when you pick a PSA, PPM tool, make sure you thought about front-end, back-end integration. This is a really important part. And then lastly is ensuring the integrity and timeliness of data as you go. So 5 things you should think about as far as best practices. So nothing better, though, than to talk about how we put these things into practice. I'm pleased to introduce Chris Nakovics, Global Resource Management Leader at ServiceNow. Chris is been responsible for strategic resource management, process operations, and shared services. He's got more than 15 years of experience doing this in resource management in a number of other areas, including partner support, which is important in the resource management process. Chris, by the way, also serves as an advisory board member at the Resource Management Institute. We're delighted for his help and support. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris. Welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Randy, and I appreciate the time. So as Randy said, I run the Global Resource Management function, which supports or aligns to customer outcomes here at ServiceNow. And there's 2 elements of that. It's the professional services as well as customer success. So ServiceNow is an enterprise software company, and our company platform products and brand are built for digital business. If you haven't heard, our tagline is making the world of work better for people. And so on here, obviously, you can just see kind of the overall growth of our organization from inception. And really the big thing I just want to call out is, a huge focus here is around our culture, our values, which are core to how we operate, how we recruit people, and how we develop our talent. So, these core values are key to us, our overall company. So we can progress here. So the first thing I want to talk about is, I think at a high level and aligning to what Randy was sharing, is really around when we talk about data management, best practices for resource management. I believe the first thing needed is to understand how the company's data is being managed. And what I mean by that is resource management should have a good understanding of the overall data model and how data flows, right? The different inputs, the outputs, system cutoffs, when data gets refreshed, etc. You should have a good understanding of everyone's role and responsibility as it relates to data. And I'm even speaking more outside of IT, but as part of the business. And just to give you guys an example, one of the functions my team plays is that, as we have new hires join and are getting set up and going through onboarding, we also have a function of making sure that folks are mapped correctly in the system as part of our PSA tool, because it all impacts the way we report on data and obviously feeding into dashboards, etc. When you think about data in practice, everyone needs to also have a good understanding of the data and the different dependencies of that data. As an example, right, schedule management, time entry cutoffs, time approval cutoffs, different touch points, such as when time is entered and approved, when does that then go over to, to the revenue team? Anything that can have a tangible impact on time recording and revenue as an example. Outside of having a good understanding of how data is managed, it's really also important that you have tight alignment of understanding your business and the key objectives, right? What strategic value are you trying to drive with data? Maybe it's around forecasting, skills development, better schedule management. Maybe you're focused around labor pyramid, driving higher margin, right? You have to determine what some of your top priorities are, that you're focused on, and how to create a plan to achieve those desired outcomes. So an example, you may be looking to reduce the amount of time it takes from when you close a deal to kick off an engagement, right? Or increase the time to get to revenue. Maybe it's about tracking certification and certification attainment, right? Regardless of what it is, the importance here, it really goes back to driving much more strategic value around data. Proceed to the next slide, Randy. So, back to, Randy mentioned talking about data integrity earlier. And the big thing I wanted to share here is, look, data accuracy and integrity is critical to running any efficient business, right? As a resource manager, I think we've all had those frustrating moments when someone is either questioning the data or, just some of these examples here, right? How come data in system A doesn't match to system B? Why is my revenue actuals off of them what was being forecasted in the system? Why is missing time up 5% this week? All different questions. And, so how do you help address those, right? What's the business approach? So as I previously discussed, at the center of everything is around the overall data model for the company, right? And that will vary, company to company or organization to organization. But in addition to that, it's also crucial that organizations have a single source of truth as it relates to data, right? There should only be one system of record, and that's extremely key to drive the data accuracy and to ensure the integrity across the entire organization. It's also important to create and document standard operating procedures so everyone understands their role around data, right? Where they're not only just the cutoffs, but maybe they vary from a weekly to a monthly to a quarterly cutoff, right? How often should I be updating my skills is another example. The third piece of this, and Randy was talking around PSA tools earlier, but around automation, right? The more you can drive through leveraging a PSA tool, and or any other type of automation, maybe through dashboards, reporting, is extremely important, right? The more you can provide a visualization of the data, that will help, as the businesses scale and grow, and really, again, focus back on better data integrity for the way that you manage the data for your organization. And last but not least, governance is required, right? To really ensure that data remains accurate and up to date. Otherwise, if it's not maintained, it can cause impact varying from, forecasting challenges to providing blind spots, right, in the business just because of data, right? And that could impact how you and leadership is actually managing the business. So now just to give it kind of quickly through like a professional services lens, obviously it's kind of my focus. But on the left-hand side here, if you think about, we have different roles, right? We have individual contributor roles, and that could be sales, could be consultants, it could be architects, project managers, right? And everyone has a different element of how they're tied to data. But for each role, it's really around their accuracy, right? How they maintain it. We need to make sure that there's good hygiene when it comes to pipeline data, as well as skills and profiles and schedules, because we then start to kind of focus around planning based on the data inputs that we have. When you think about resource management, right, and our primary function, it's not only about the way we kind of, coordinate, facilitate around that data, but there's some governance that sits with resource management. But really, we're the ones that are also helping to provide a lot of insights around the data. And that's really tied to staffing, forecasting, capacity planning, right? Being a business partner to the leadership team. And ultimately, when you look at the business leaders, and you could understand between all these roles, there's a lot of different dependencies across the board, right? But ultimately, it's a leadership team that's going to consume that data and make decisions, right? So when you think about it, maybe it is around, hey, we need to hire, 20 people over the next quarter or two. Or maybe it's we have to shift headcount from one area where there's a decrease in demand to an area that's on a, an uptick in demand, and we need to, shift and cross-train and move folks around, right? So it's really important going back to the data integrity and really having good hygiene around data. Go to the next slide, Randy.
Yep, here we go.
Okay. So the other thing I want to talk about is when you think about different businesses and as business mature, right? And if you think about the complexity of data, right? And what I did here is just kind of take it through three different kind of pieces from skill, staffing, and forecasting, right? And depending what company or organization you're with, I'm sure you've seen your own evolution of from maybe day one that you started to kind of where the business is today. And so the key things here is whether it used to be that you used to have a one single product skill set, right? And maybe clearance, But now it's really about multiple products, right? It's about different platforms, integrations, industry verticals is a huge focus right now in the market. When you think about staffing, I believe we've come from which was a more controlled environment, right? Where we did have more control, less restriction. But now if you think about it, there's other outside factors that impact how we staff, right? Immigration policies, privacy laws, right? The European Union, as an example, is going through a major kind of overhaul, which is really around privacy for the EU, right? Vaccinations, right? A new undertaking that we're doing where there might be potential mandates. These are all outside things that, you know, are further complexity of how we have to think about data, report on it, and use it to do our jobs. And then lastly, you know, think about that, you know, a lot of companies or organizations always have kind of a core business model, right? A more structured framework, but a lot of companies now are going through becoming more agile. They're evolving, right? They're developing different business models, business strategies. So, you know, really, if you think about it, there's not complexity at one level, but many different kind of factors across the board. So something I want to share, because that's how you obviously drive a lot more focus around strategic value with data. And the last thing I would just want to share is more from my perspective and just kind of a use case, you know, back to the just-in-time resourcing wheel that Randy was talking about earlier, and just to focus in on skills inventory, skills management. On my first slide, I talked about, right, what are the business objectives you have? How do you define your priorities and create a plan? And so that's what we've been doing around our skills database, the inventory, how we manage skills. And the reason why is because we have a lot more complexity in our business. We do have multiple business models. We do have a huge focus right now on cross-training and further supporting the professional development of our employees. And ultimately, it's around career progression, right? So it's no longer just looking at skills on how do we staff an engagement, but taking that same data and letting that permeate through the organization and supporting the development of our staff and our talent. How are we doing that? One system and one process, right? It's defined. This is how we're doing it. We don't want to see Excel workbooks anymore or different tracking sheets. We want everything in the tool, right? Enablement. You know, we've done a lot of hiring, so it's not just that people aren't maybe aware of the process and procedures, but sometimes you have to keep them aware that this is very important, and we got to make sure that people are focused on maintaining their own data. As an employee, I should be updating my skills, but with my manager, I should be sitting there and on a periodic basis reviewing them with him or her to make sure, you know, what's their view around my skills and my level within those skills. And then lastly, back to before, and the reason why I have these kind of highlighted here, you know, if you set it and forget it, that becomes a challenge. It goes back to the data integrity, right? You have to have a good governance approach and keep things consistently updated, right? And then ultimately, at the end of the day, it's around having and providing more actionable type data, providing the insights around the data that could support decisions to be made around the business. Randy, okay. That's everything I have, so I'll turn it back over to yourself.
Perfect. Before we get to the Q&A, and we'll have an opportunity to ask Chris some questions or myself, I want to go over some upcoming events, but I did want to comment. Chris's last slide was really great, and it's, again, a great reference document. The skills management, skills database is one of the two areas most of our members struggle with, and ServiceNow is very focused on this. You can see, and I'm glad Chris used that as an example of where they're focused on good data management practices. So it's you know, I want to just do a quick commercial on our upcoming courses for the RMCP program. If you're not an RMCP and you're looking for good education on this, it's an opportunity for you to learn the only commercial grade solution in the marketplace for resource management, where you can learn our best practices. You get access to a resource center. You get to collaborate with your peers during the course. And you get a copy of this robust commercial grade resource management practice. We got tons of companies that have put their RM teams through it. The course is offered 3 ways: in class, in Cincinnati, or at our event coming up in April in Dallas, online, and we also have an on-demand version of the course. And we teach the 6 elements of just-in-time resourcing as a part of this, and you can see the costs there. All this information is available online. We've got a whole bunch of courses coming up next year. We've expanded we've got a lot more demand for these courses, so we're expanding the number of opportunities we have to teach these courses. Our in-class stuff there on the left, online in the middle, and our newest addition to our curriculum, our advanced resource management course being offered at the Resource Management Global Symposium coming up. And again, don't forget any of these, the whole course is available on demand, so you can watch it when you need it. There are bundled prices available if you're going to attend the Global Symposium along with that, so you can check those out on the event website, which brings me to this. We've run 2 of these. We had to skip a couple of years because of the pandemic, but we're back to April 28th and 29th in Dallas, Texas, at the Dallas Airport Marriott. It'll be our 3rd annual Resource Management Global Symposium. We're focused on future-proofing resource management. We'll have great opportunities for you to interact with your peers, hear lots of expert speakers. We're going to have quite a few vendors there as sponsors showing resource management technology. It's just a great place, all things resource management, all for a day and a half in Dallas in April. So hope you'll be able to join us and head out to the website at rmresourcemanagement.com/symposium. Before I get to the Q&A, I want to say again, thank you to MavenLink, Keyed-In, and Tempus Resource for their support of this webcast. We really appreciate their past, present, and hopefully future support of what we do. With that, I'm going to go to the Q&A here, and we got quite a few questions in here, and we got a few minutes left, so we'll do our best to answer as many as we can. And Chris, I'm going to start with you. We got one question here: as you've been working through the skills inventory enhancement process, what are some of the biggest challenges you faced at ServiceNow?
So with the current focus right now around skills, I'd say there's probably 2 things that have been the biggest challenge. One is around the governance, as I explained earlier, which I think, look, the last thing you want to do is to start to have to reinvent the wheel, right? So if you're not really maintaining the data and have a good governance model, that's what I tend to sometimes see, right, is having to recreate a lot or going back to the drawing board a little bit sometimes. And so the less you could do that, the better governance is key. The second challenge I would say that we had is, the data is used for different purposes, right? So for example, staffing, you need to make sure skills are the right way that as we sell deals, what are the skills that come in for staffing, which sometimes are a subset of the way a manager might look at his skills with his individuals, right? And so it's got to be, I would say, Randy, probably a balanced approach is one thing I would say, because what you don't want to do is have way too many skills in there that becomes unmanageable, but you got to have the right amount of skills that make it, you to be successful in performing your role as a resource manager.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Chris. There's another question in here. This one is for the RMI. How do you I'm paraphrasing this. We spent a lot of money on things to enhance data management. How do we convince senior management to continue to invest more in resource management? And there's not one answer to that question. I'd point you to several things that you can get help from the RMI. You can go out and grab a copy of our utilization calculator. That's one thing, and to show if you make improvements by better investments, what that will drive to your bottom line. There are 19 research reports out in our library. Go out and look at them. There's a ton of research out there that gives you a lot of information about value that can be derived from resource management investments. And then lastly, I will mention our advanced RM course. For those of you who've been through the RMCP program, we've got a great part of that training that talks about how to deal with the C office and how do you sell resource management inside your organization to get more enthusiasm and hopefully more financial support behind that. Let's see here. I see another question out here. Let's see here. Demand and supply forecasting. Have you attained a mature level of data management? Can you give us an idea of the time cycles to achieve the level you're at today? Chris, that's for you. So how would you consider your maturity level of data management, and how long did it take you to get there, and where are you going?
Yeah, so I would say, look, I think it's an ever evolving event when it comes to data, right? And I think it goes a lot back to just as the overall complexity of things change. I think the big thing I would say too is it really is around kind of making sure you have the right business partnerships in place, right? So for example, one thing I know that we're focused on is, we got a tight interlock with our BI organization and analytics, right? So if there's things that we can or can't do within the tool, the PSA tool, that's great, but then how do we then get it into more of a visualization, right? The right representation. So I would say it's around partnership. And I think the biggest thing too is, again, I think a lot goes back to everyone understanding their role when it comes to data and what types of data. So, it's not a one and done. It really is kind of a continuous evolution, just because the business changes, the types of data you're looking at changes. So it really kind of does continue to evolve.
Okay, perfect. We are at the top of the hour. I want to, this is Randy again, I want to say thanks to Chris Nakovics for taking the time to share your insights at ServiceNow with us. Chris, really appreciate that very much. I want to thank all of you for participating today. We had a huge attendance today. The power-ups keep getting bigger and bigger. We hope we'll keep bringing subjects to you, topics to you that'll keep you interested. And again, thanks to our sponsors for the event. With that, Thomas, we'll go ahead and close the broadcast.
Very good. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Randy, and thank you, Chris.